Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Whether you're here for self-help, personal growth, or business inspiration, there's something for everyone. Today we're diving into a true classic of management literature, Peter Drucker's The Effective Executive. Published in 1966, this book remains incredibly relevant today, offering timeless wisdom for anyone who wants to be more effective in their work. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Management? That's not for me. I'm not a CEO or even a manager. But hold on a second. Drucker makes it clear that being an executive isn't about your title or position. It's about taking responsibility for getting the right things done, no matter what your role. Whether you're a student, an entrepreneur, a stay-at-home parent, or a corporate climber, the principles in The Effective Executive can help you maximize your impact. As Jim Collins states in the foreword, anyone who seeks how best to self-deploy on the few priorities that will make the biggest impact is an executive. So, let's jump right in. Drucker begins by emphasizing a fundamental truth: effectiveness can be learned. It's not some innate quality that you're either born with or not. It's a set of practices, habits of mind, that anyone can develop with conscious effort and consistent application. Think of it like learning to play a musical instrument. Natural talent certainly helps, but consistent practice is what ultimately makes the difference. One of the biggest obstacles to effectiveness, Drucker points out, is the way we tend to perceive and manage our time. We're often deluded about how we actually spend our time. We think we're focusing on important tasks, but a time log will often reveal a different story. Drucker emphasizes the importance of recording our time, managing our time, and consolidating our time. Recording time means keeping a detailed log of how you actually spend your hours. This isn't about micromanaging every minute, but about gaining an honest understanding of where your time goes. Once you have that data, you can start managing your time by identifying and eliminating time wasters. Drucker suggests asking 3 key questions. What would happen if this were not done at all? Which of these activities could be done by somebody else? And what do I do that wastes others' time? This last question is particularly powerful, as it highlights the ripple effect of our actions on others. Are your work habits, your meetings, your communication style inadvertently consuming other people's time without adding value? Beyond personal time management, Drucker also discusses organizational time wasters like recurrent crises, overstaffing, malorganization, often evidenced by too many meetings, and malfunctions in information. Finally, Drucker stresses the importance of consolidating our discretionary time, the time we actually have control over, into large, uninterrupted blocks. This is crucial for tackling important tasks that require deep focus and extended effort. Short bursts of time are rarely sufficient for meaningful work, especially for knowledge workers. As Drucker explains, what one postpones, one actually abandons. Therefore, effective executives must learn to consolidate their time to focus on what matters. Drucker tells us that it's important to manage our time, as it's a truly unique, irreplaceable, and limited resource, while things like capital and labor aren't as limited and are sometimes replaceable. He also makes the point that time demands on knowledge workers are high, particularly when innovation is involved, and it's important for them to manage their time well. He provides the example of British businessmen who worked short hours like their employees, but ultimately failed at innovation because of it. The next crucial practice for effective executives is focusing on contribution. This means asking, what can I contribute that will significantly affect the performance and results of the institution I serve? It's about shifting your focus from efforts to results, from what the organization owes you to what you can give to the organization. Drucker distinguishes between 3 key areas of contribution: direct results, building values, and developing people. Direct results are the most obvious, like sales or profits in a business, or patient care in a hospital. Building values means defining what the organization stands for, its core principles and beliefs. And developing people involves preparing the next generation of leaders and ensuring the organization's long-term viability. The focus on contribution is especially crucial for knowledge workers who often specialize in narrow areas. Drucker argues that the effective specialist must consider the usability of their knowledge, asking who has to use my output for it to become effective. This leads naturally to better communication, teamwork, and development of both oneself and others. He emphasizes the importance of making a contribution toward one's organization's purpose, rather than narrowly focusing on individual interests. He further elaborates on this concept with examples of direct results being misinterpreted. He gives the example of airlines in Great Britain that are torn between three different goals: business, national policy, and supporting the aircraft industry. He tells us that value commitments can be unclear as well, with the example of the Department of Agriculture in the U.S. being torn between agricultural productivity and the nostalgia of the family farm. Drucker stresses the fact that an organization is made to overcome mortality and needs to be able to provide the people that can perpetuate it. He discusses the importance of upward contribution as a force that develops people by setting high standards. Another important aspect of contribution is effective meetings. Drucker argues that most meetings are a waste of time due to poor organization. He advocates for clearly defining the purpose of each meeting in advance. Is it for decision-making, information sharing, or something else? He emphasizes the importance of sticking to the defined purpose and ending the meeting as soon as it's achieved. Drucker gives us an example of the importance of contribution with a story of a new hospital administrator who thought that a patient care matter had been settled, but was challenged by another participant who asked if it would have satisfied a particular nurse who was known for having high standards when it came to patient care. Her question restarted the argument, which ultimately led to a more ambitious resolution. The fourth practice of effective executives is making strength productive. This builds on the idea of contribution by emphasizing that we should focus on what people can do rather than what they can't do. Drucker argues that there is no such thing as a good man. Good for what is the question. This applies to staffing decisions as well. Effective executives hire and promote based on strengths, not just the absence of weaknesses. They look for excellence in one major area rather than mediocrity across the board. He discusses how Abraham Lincoln hired Ulysses S. Grant based on his strength in leading winning campaigns rather than getting held back by his personal weaknesses, like liking alcohol. He compares this to how General Robert E. Lee chose his generals by focusing on their strengths, even if they also had weaknesses. Drucker provides a story that illustrates the productivity of strength with a story of one of Lee's generals who went against his orders and ruined Lee's plan, yet Lee ultimately kept him as he was still effective at his job overall. He contrasts this hiring approach with the idea that executives should build jobs to fit the personalities available. Instead, he recommends making each job demanding and big, so that it presents a challenge and chance for a person's strength to shine through, and allows a person to rise to new challenges when situations change. He further advises that effective executives should avoid impossible jobs, those which have defeated 2 or 3 people in a row despite their having previously performed well in other roles. These jobs should be redesigned rather than assuming they can be solved by a genius. As he notes, common people achieving uncommon performance is how an organization is tested. Drucker tells us about an effective executive he knew who automatically decided to move anyone who was considered indispensable by their boss, as that meant that either the superior or subordinate was weak, or both, and they should be separated and have their weaknesses examined. Effective executives also focus on their superior's strengths, asking, "What can my boss do really well?" and "What does he need from me to perform?" This isn't about flattery, but about understanding how to best support your boss and make your own contributions more effective. He gives the example of government civil servants using their minister's strength, political relationships, to help them be effective rather than trying to correct their weaknesses in other areas like policy or administration. They also adapt to their boss's communication style. Are they a reader or a listener? Do they prefer detailed reports or concise summaries? Drucker provides the example of how President Eisenhower preferred having things summarized for him in a single page before he could make decisions on them. He stresses how understanding one's boss's way of working is important for success, and how to structure the form in which material is presented to superiors. Furthermore, effective executives focus on their own strengths. They know what they do well and how they work best, whether it's writing, speaking, analyzing, or negotiating. Drucker gives an anecdote about how when he first began consulting at General Motors, the chairman Alfred Sloan told him to focus on what he thought was right rather than the compromises that would be needed to make his suggestions acceptable. He provides several more anecdotes on this, including a railroad financial VP getting permission to do some radical things that actually turned out to not need the permission he thought he needed in the first place, as well as an anecdote about an effective hospital administrator who realized that he needed to make the feedback faster to the admissions department so that doctors could be better informed on bed availability. Drucker's point is that it is best to focus on opportunities rather than problems, especially when it comes to people, where effective executives see them as opportunities to multiply performance by leveraging their strengths rather than getting held back by their weaknesses. The fifth practice Drucker discusses is putting first things first. This means concentrating on the most important tasks and doing one thing at a time. He points out that there are always more contributions to be made than there is time available, and that to be effective, one must choose carefully where to focus one's efforts. He emphasizes how concentration is important because doing one thing at a time ultimately means it gets done faster than multitasking would have otherwise allowed. He gives the example of a former chief executive at a pharmaceutical company who focused on just a few tasks at a time over many years and ultimately transformed the company to a global leader. A key aspect of prioritizing is sloughing off yesterday, getting rid of tasks and activities that are no longer productive. Drucker encourages executives to regularly review their work programs and ask, if we did not already do this, would we go into it now? If the answer is no, it's time to cut bait. Yesterday's successes, Drucker warns, can be particularly difficult to let go of. They become investments in managerial ego and drain resources that could be better used on future opportunities. He gives the example of government programs that become difficult to remove because they're considered eternal and become vested interests. He suggests that perhaps these government programs should expire after a fixed number of years, like 10, unless they are specifically prolonged through new legislation. But this principle applies to any organization, not just government. Businesses can cling to outdated products or processes. Universities can maintain irrelevant courses, all in the name of tradition or past success. Drucker points out that it's important to slough off the past because if something new goes wrong, it'll require the attention and abilities of those most capable in the organization to bail it out. He tells us that it is often the case that good ideas for a new project within an organization never get started because the people needed to start them are too busy on older, irrelevant projects. Closely related to sloughing off yesterday is the ability to set priorities and posteriorities. Priorities are the tasks you choose to focus on, while posteriorities are the tasks you consciously decide not to do. Drucker argues that setting posteriorities is often harder than setting priorities because it means saying no to seemingly important tasks. He provides the example of DuPont doing so well because they regularly abandon products before they start declining. He contrasts this to other companies that maintain their products long past their prime and have difficulties being innovative. He points out that it's sometimes hard to set posteriorities, as what might seem like a posteriority might turn into a triumph for one's competitor. Yet if you don't set posteriorities, nothing will get done. He provides the example of Presidents Eisenhower and Kennedy not wanting to give a high priority to civil rights, while Johnson saw Vietnam as a posteriority. Drucker offers 4 key rules for identifying priorities: pick the future over the past, focus on opportunities rather than problems, choose your own direction, and aim high. The 6th and 7th chapters of The Effective Executive dive into the crucial topic of decision-making. Drucker emphasizes that effective decisions are not based on finding the facts first. Rather, they begin with opinions, which are essentially untested hypotheses. The effective decision-maker encourages people to express their opinions, but then challenges them to think through what facts would be needed to prove or disprove those opinions. He illustrates the importance of this by discussing the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. The two major criteria for the invasion were at odds with each other: overthrowing Castro and maintaining the appearance of non-intervention by the U.S. The decision-makers focused on the wrong boundary conditions, assuming the invasion could be successful without overt U.S. support. He contrasts this to Kennedy's success in the Cuban Missile Crisis, when he focused on the correct boundary conditions, allowing him to see which compromises he could accept. A crucial question in decision-making is, what is the criterion of relevance? This often comes down to finding the appropriate measurement for the situation. Drucker argues that the effective executive challenges traditional measurements, recognizing that they often reflect past decisions that may no longer be valid. He gives the example of Robert McNamara challenging the traditional measurement used for military inventory, changing the focus to the few, most expensive, and most important items for combat readiness rather than all items. Another critical element of effective decision-making is organized disagreement. Drucker points out that consensus often leads to poor decisions. He gives the anecdote of Alfred Sloan proposing to postpone a decision everyone agreed on, asking for more time to develop disagreement in order to better understand it. The best decisions arise from the clash of conflicting views and the careful consideration of alternatives. Drucker explains that disagreements are often not because people are unreasonable or acting in bad faith, but simply because they see different realities based on different positions in the organization. An example provided in the book is American steel executives complaining about feather bedding by union employees, who see any instance of the company doing this as irrelevant. The point here is that if each side were to understand each other's perspective, they'd be stronger. Drucker tells us that effective executives focus on understanding their opposition rather than just trying to prove them wrong. He gives the example of law students being asked to make the best case for their opposition in order to know how to counter them well and understand their position. Other key questions to ask in the decision-making process include, is this a generic situation or an exception? What are the boundary conditions? What is right? What action needs to be taken? Who needs to know? Who is going to do it? How does the action need to be carried out? And how are we going to get feedback? Effective executives also consider whether a decision is even necessary in the first place. Sometimes doing nothing is the best course of action. In the book's conclusion, Drucker returns to his central theme: effectiveness can be learned. He summarizes the key practices discussed in the book and emphasizes how they contribute not only to individual effectiveness, but also to organizational development and the overall health of society. He notes that simply recording where one's time goes can trigger self-reflection and improve effectiveness. He also highlights the importance of developing leadership qualities. Not necessarily charismatic leadership, but the leadership of dedication, determination, and purpose. He emphasizes how in today's world, effectiveness is especially important in knowledge organizations, as the productivity of the knowledge worker becomes more relevant with the decline in the relative value of the manual worker. In the afterword, Zachary First challenges us not to just admire the book's wisdom, but to actually use it. He quotes Don Keough, former president of Coca-Cola, who recalled Drucker asking him after every meeting, "Don't tell me you had a wonderful meeting with me. Tell me what you are going to do on Monday that's different." So I ask you the same question. What will you do on Monday that's different? Here are some key heuristics, easy to remember takeaways from The Effective Executive. To help you on your journey to greater effectiveness. Time is your scarcest resource. Record it, manage it, consolidate it. Focus on contribution. Ask yourself, what can I contribute? Build on strengths. Yours, your boss's, your team's. First things first. Concentrate, prioritize, slough off yesterday. Effective decisions. Start with opinions, organize disagreement, think through boundary conditions. Be courageous. Thanks for watching. Have you read it? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.